Welcome to Restless Killers and Mysteries with Roger Heilig, where we'll explore the most intriguing and terrifying stories of human evil. A.M. Wolf's Beyond the Grassy Knoll, How JFK's Death Changed American Society forever vividly depicts this episode. Wolf is now available through Amazon and Audible. A fascinating read that changes our view on a historic event is ideal for our inquisitive and intellectually adventurous listeners. Today we'll look at Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow's complicated relationship. If you've never heard of them, you're in for quite a surprise. Imagine combining a horror tale and a suspense thriller, only to discover that everything truly happened. That is the type of story we are going into. Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, a couple with an apparently normal background but a profoundly nasty present, are characters straight out of a psychological thriller. This episode will attempt to unravel their web of deception, bizarre beliefs, and inexplicable behavior. We'll investigate their apocalypse forecasts, terrifying crimes, and the bizarre love story that ties everything together. But don't worry, my role is to ensure that even people unfamiliar with the case follow the story effortlessly. So, whether you're a real crime fan or just starting out, sit tight. We're starting from the beginning and setting out everything piece by piece. So get ready for a crazy ride as we explore the strange and unsettling world of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. I promise you will not forget this story. Let's get started. Okay everyone, let's get started and figure out where this terrifying story came from. To grasp the dark narrative we're about to explore, we must first get to know the main protagonists, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. Chad Daybell was once a seemingly average individual. Chad was born in Provo, Utah, and raised in a close-knit religious family. He was deeply involved with the LDS Church, often known as the Mormon Church. Chad had an obsessive desire to write from a young age, which prompted him to write a series of books based on his somewhat unconventional interpretations of biblical predictions. If the combination of religion and apocalyptic speculation sounds like a prescription for catastrophe, brace up. Chad attended Brigham Young University and studied journalism, which further increased his passion for narrative. After college, he had a variety of occupations, including grave digging, a detail that seems almost too obvious for what he would eventually become involved in. Chad, who has a strong sense of drama, has written several books on near-death experiences and the impending end of the world. He was charismatic, convincing, and had a small but devoted following who believed his doomsday forecasts. Lori Vallow is here. Lori Noreen Cox, born in San Bernardino, California, seems to have an active and fulfilling life. Lori was married several times, and her relationships read like a soap opera script rather than real life. She had already been through a lot of emotional anguish before meeting Chad. Lori had developed a predisposition for apocalyptic ideas and extreme religious enthusiasm, despite her appearance of normalcy, which included her activities as a cheerleader and beauty pageant contender. Lori's life took a terrible turn in Phoenix, Arizona, where she was living with her then-husband, Charles Vallow. Lori, known for her charismatic personality and beauty, became increasingly obsessed with prophecies and disturbing spiritual visions. Lori was an extroverted mother with 2 children, Tylee and JJ. However, behind closed doors, her mentality was embroiled in notions about demonic possessions and her divine role in the end times. So how did these two people, orbiting in their own weird universes, eventually collide? Lori and Chad met in 2018 during a religious preparatory event called Preparing a People. The chemistry was instant. Consider a match meeting gasoline, a spark that started a disaster. Lori, who had previously been heavily influenced by apocalyptic dogma, discovered in Chad a mentor, a kindred spirit, and probably even a soulmate. Chad and Lori's relationship grew swiftly, prompting Lori to undertake significant life choices. Lori's marriage to Charles Vallow became more stressful as her devotion to Chad's beliefs strengthened. Charles even filed for divorce, alleging Lori threatened to murder him, and had become obsessed with the alternative religious belief system. Things got out of control faster than anyone could have predicted. Meanwhile, Chad saw Lori as a spiritual muse. She fits seamlessly into his great tale of impending Armageddon. The relationship rapidly shifted from mentor-protege to something considerably more sinister. Lori, fascinated and tied by Chad's strange charisma, began to envision herself as a divine agent on a mission to carry out God's purpose. What ensued was a sinister conspiracy combining religious zeal with terrifying criminal intent. So there it is, the once upon a time of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. These two people, with separate lives and peculiar spiritual convictions, were brought together like moths to a flame. Their love created a vortex of darkness that would eventually swallow their families and have fatal effects. Now that we've established how our story's key characters met, let's go on to the disturbing ideas and heinous deeds that followed. Stay with me as we go down this gloomy path. Okay folks, now we're getting into some pretty creepy area. Until recently, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow may have appeared to be rather ordinary people with a love of romance books and an aptitude for parenting. But this is where the mask begins to fall, revealing the odd reality of their existence. First, let's discuss Chad Daybell. Consider your normal guy next door. Now turn that image into something far more evil. Born in 1968, Chad claimed to have had several near-death experiences that provided him with supernatural knowledge. Essentially, he considered himself as a modern-day prophet. He established a publishing company dealing in religious fiction, primarily centered on apocalyptic themes, and amassed a sizable following. Chad had the illusion of foresight, an extraordinary capacity to anticipate the end of the world. And believe me, none of his stories ended with happily ever after. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely people don't fall for this stuff. This is when Lori Vallow enters the picture. Lori, a complex figure herself, with a history marked by tumultuous marriages and an unbreakable dedication to her children, or so it appeared. Born in 1973, she was first regarded as a devoted mother and nice neighbor. But somewhere along the way, she began to sink into the abyss of extreme religious beliefs, which only grew as she drew toward Chad's terrible prophecies. Enter the perfect storm. Lori and Chad met at a religious conference in 2018, and sparks flew. They nearly combusted. Lori was enamored with Chad's apocalypse prophecies, which perfectly matched her growing religious fervor. These two were essentially a marriage made in disaster heaven. Together, they began to weave a macabre story that blurred the lines between reality and fantasy, life and death. Here's where it gets even worse. They started spouting notions that weren't just bizarre, but downright frightening. Chad claimed to identify humans as light or dark spirits, effectively categorizing souls as good or evil. Lori, for her part, totally accepted these views, even labeling her own children as zombies filled with dark spirits. Their doctrine also featured a new Jerusalem that would emerge following an apocalyptic event. It sounds like a page out of a dystopian novel, right? But the fact that they were dead serious about these statements makes it even more scary. This is hardly the kind of bedtime story that anyone wants to hear. While Chad was busy predicting doom, Lori sought refuge in a cosmic mission, a so-called holy quest that necessitated a significant amount of cleaning of the earth. They weren't talking about sweeping dusty floors or clearing up rubbish, though. They were determined to cleanse the world of evil spirits, and their techniques were as perverse as one could imagine. Their newfound spiritual path was not kept hidden either. Chad has written several books, and Lori participates in a variety of podcasts and forums where they share their twisted beliefs. This wasn't just idle talk. They were recruiting and convincing people that the end times were approaching and that their instructions were divine. Amidst all of this, Lori's relationships began to deteriorate. Lori's then-husband, Charles Vallow, even sought assistance from law authorities, stating that Lori was losing touch with reality and claiming to be a god called to lead mankind during the second coming of Christ. However, as in a Greek tragedy plot, no one heard these warnings in time. It's important to note that the web they woven wasn't only about spirituality. Financial gain and power both played important roles in their sad story. They managed and maneuvered in ways that were not merely unethical but also criminal, laying the groundwork for the horrific events that were to follow. So there you have it, Chad's apocalypse forecasts and Lori's weird spiritual commands. Together, they created a frightening and dangerous fantasy, and it wasn't long until their dark partnership had real-world implications. This perverted belief system laid the groundwork for the tragic events that followed. And, when illusions of grandeur combine with apocalyptic desires, the outcome isn't simply a mystery. It's a terrifying formula for calamity. Get ready, because we're about to get into the grisly specifics of the crimes they were involved in. Crimes as dark and twisted as their beliefs. Consider this. It's early September 2019, and Lori Vallow's children, Tylee, Ryan, and JJ Vallow, were last seen in Rexburg, Idaho. This was the beginning of a terrifying nightmare. Hold on, for this story just gets darker. First, let us discuss about Tylee. Tylee was last seen on September 8, 2019, while on a family trip to Yellowstone National Park. You may assume a family vacation is all about fun and sunshine, but for Tylee, this would be her last known moment on this world. Lori, Tylee, JJ, and Alex Cox, Lori's brother, were all present. Tylee vanished into thin air. JJ, on the other hand, was last seen attending his elementary school on September 23, 2019. JJ was just 7 years old, a youngster with special needs whose brilliant grin could melt a glacier. But after that date, he too vanished. Lori and her new husband, Chad Daybell, informed everyone that JJ had left to stay with family friends. Spoiler alert, he did not. Okay, now brace yourselves, because this is where things get very scary. Let's fast forward to June 2020. Authorities discovered Tylee and JJ's bones buried in shallow graves on Chad Daybell's farm. And let me tell you, they weren't just hidden. The manner in which they were discovered shows that significant effort was put into assuring they would never be seen again. Tylee was dismembered and burned, while JJ was wrapped in plastic and duct taped. It's darker than any horror film you've ever seen. Moving on, we must address the strange death of Chad Daybell's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Tammy was a healthy, lively woman who loved life and enjoyed writing. On October 19, 2019, she was discovered dead in her own bed. Chad initially stated that she died quietly in her sleep, claiming natural causes. Her then-loving husband, Chad, believed she died naturally. Thus no autopsy was performed at the time. Nobody realized that this was just the beginning. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who had a history of questionable conduct, passed away unexpectedly in December 2019. Initially, this was considered a natural cause, specifically blood clots. However, the coincidence of Lori and Chad's deaths began to raise questions. Can you smell the lie brewing? By now, authorities were on high alert. Tammy's body was excavated for a more thorough examination, and the results were suspicious enough to transfer the case from natural causes to homicide investigation area. Authorities assumed Tammy was asphyxiated, though particular details are being kept as part of the continuing investigation. Let's not forget about Lori's third husband, Charles Vallow, and the weird shooting event that occurred in July 2019. Alex Cox shot him in self-defense, a scenario that seems far too convenient given the ensuing facts. Consider a tangled web of lies and deception so thick that your head spins. So, what is the collective context here? Lori and Chad were immersed in an apocalyptic belief system that eventually led to fatal repercussions. They regarded the youngsters as zombies soulless, and saw their killings as a vital step in ridding the world of darkness. I understand, right? Mind-blowing and terribly frightening. As the investigation progressed, Lori and Chad continued to weave this denial narrative. They escaped to Hawaii, where they had an unusual honeymoon, distant from the stormy waters they had left behind in Idaho. Their careless demeanor while officials were frantically hunting for the children reveals much about their thinking. Authorities understood they had their work cut out for them, piecing together a bleak mosaic of death, deception, and delusion. By the time they arrived on Chad's property and saw the children's corpses, the story Lori and Chad had built began to crumble faster than a Jenga tower in an earthquake. Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell face charges ranging from conspiracy to commit murder to first-degree murder. They are accused of planning and carrying out a sequence of horrible acts that resulted in the deaths of Lori's children and Chad's wife, all guided by their perverted doomsday beliefs. And as we delve deeper into their trials, realize that sometimes the truth is not only stranger than fiction, but sometimes more frightening. Welcome back, everyone. Let us now dig headfirst into the research that revealed Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow's convoluted web of lies, deception, and genuinely disturbing conduct. It all began with a phone call in late November 2019, one that would open Pandora's box. Kay Woodcock, JJ Vallow's biological grandmother, contacted the police, concerned that she hadn't heard from her grandson in weeks. The police were aware that JJ and his older sister, Tylee, had been missing for some time. But instead of finding an overprotective grandmother exaggerating things, they were about to come upon one of the most confusing and deeply twisted cases they'd ever seen. A welfare check revealed the first big hint. Officers went to Lori Vallow's home in Rexburg, Idaho. Lori remained calm and resolute, stating that JJ was staying with a family friend in Arizona. Isn't it pretty convenient? When the authorities investigated, they learned that the alleged family friend hadn't seen the children in months. The red flags were now fluttering fiercely. This first deception's simplicity began to reveal layers of a far more sophisticated and dangerous truth. Let's take a step back. Lori and Chad had just married while receiving welfare checks. But here's something that might surprise you. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, died just weeks before Lori and Chad married. Tammy's death was initially attributed to natural causes, which seemed unusual. However, due to the mounting cloud of suspicion, it was classed as suspicious. When officials requested an autopsy and exhumation of Tammy's body, they discovered frightening inconsistencies. While we don't have all of the public information, and probably never will, it's safe to conclude things didn't match up. Meanwhile, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who had an unusual aptitude for being present during strange happenings, took center stage in another mystery. He was discovered deceased in December 2019, apparently from natural causes. Coincidence? Probably not, but let us keep on. The detectives next focused on digital evidence, which revealed a tale far different from what Chad and Lori had painted. Cell phone data served as the breadcrumbs in this Hansel and Gretel scenario. Alex Cox's phone data revealed that he spent a large amount of time in Chad Daybell's backyard on key occasions when the children had already gone missing. Isn't this creepy? Yes, but it is also really vital. Investigating Lori and Chad's religious cult, like beliefs and hidden apocalypse preparations, complicated matters even more. Their odd and grandiose views, even by religious extremist standards, included allegations that certain people were zombies who needed to be killed in order for apocalyptic preparations to be completed. Understandably, this raised more than a few eyebrows. Then came the shocker. Investigators obtained a search warrant at Chad Daybell's home in June 2020. Following months of building suspicion and restless nights for many of those concerned. This was a watershed moment. They discovered human bones buried in the backyard, hidden in a makeshift pet graveyard. These were eventually verified to be Tylee and JJ's. The extent of duplicity and savagery was astonishing. These findings were heartbreaking, but also pivotal. They allowed authorities to arrest Lori and Chad on various charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. The paperwork and digital trail were extensive and intricate, revealing a landscape of deception that seemed to have no boundaries. There were made-up stories, twisted text messages, and odd statements to friends and family intended to disguise the dismal reality of their conduct. It cannot be overstated how important public and family pressure were in keeping this probe alive and thorough. Kay and Larry Woodcock, as well as others who refused to give up on Tylee and JJ, made significant contributions. So there you have it, the painstaking and determined inquiry that shattered the shell of normalcy Chad and Lori so desperately clung to, revealing the horrific underbelly hidden beneath. It serves as a sharp reminder that no secret can be kept hidden indefinitely, both physically and metaphorically. The courtroom is a place where drama plays out in very real and serious ways, and the trials of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow are no different. So let's get into the developments, the gavel-hitting moments, and where we are now. First, let us return to the arrest. Remember when the cops eventually apprehended our two enemies in Hawaii? Oh, the islands couldn't be peaceful for long with these people around. Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow were eventually transported back to Idaho, each wearing handcuffs instead of Hawaiian shirts. Lori was charged with the abandonment of her two children, Tylee and JJ, while Chad was accused of concealing evidence, among other things. The legal proceedings have been a tangled web of claims and counterclaims. Lori, as expected, pleaded not guilty to the felony allegations of abandonment and non-support of dependent children. Meanwhile, Chad faced allegations of destroying, altering, or concealing evidence. Needless to say, both maintained innocence in the most baffling manner possible, expressing neither regret or care for the piling charges. Of course, the charges increased in severity as the story progressed. With the finding of the children's remains in Chad Daybell's property, he and Lori went from questionable characters to outright murder suspects. In May 21, they were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and grand theft by fraud in connection with Tylee and JJ's murders. Chad was also charged with first-degree murder again, this time for the death of his first wife, Tammy Daybell. In the courtroom, there is more Shakespearean tragedy than Law and Order. The horrifying information disclosed during the trial sessions are not suitable for the faint of heart. Witnesses, including law enforcement personnel and erstwhile acquaintances, spoke about Chad and Lori's odd and unpleasant behavior. We learned of foreboding letters, apocalyptic preparations, and even attempts to obtain life insurance policies for Tammy Daybell just before her sad demise. What about the cult-like following and their strange beliefs? This brings us to Lori's competence hearing. Lori was first ruled unfit for trial owing to her mental state. However, after months of treatment at a state mental facility, she was found competent. This isn't a movie plot. It's cold, brutal reality that keeps us riveted and horrified at every turn. Chad Daybell's defense, on the other hand, attempted to use the "I was just following orders" card, claiming that Lori had some influence over his actions. However, the prosecution portrays a different picture. Two conspirators who were tightly connected in planning some of the most terrible acts imaginable. The text exchanges between them, love notes intermingled with discussion of sinister spiritual quests, tell a story of intentional wickedness. So where does this leave us now? Chad and Lori are currently confronting the conclusion of their tribulations. The prosecution has been persistent in putting together the puzzle of their lives, one horrible detail at a time. Defense counsel battled to unravel the numerous charges, which range from horrific texts to highly incriminating physical evidence. As the gavel approaches the final verdict, many people wonder, what will justice look like for Tylee, JJ, and Tammy? Will there be resolution, or will this trial, like so many others, leave us with unanswered questions and unsettling doubts? One thing is certain, the long arms of the law have caught up with Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow's twisted world. Whether they achieve forgiveness or spend their life in prison, this evil link leaves an indelible mark on criminal history. And that is where we are now, folks. Moving forward through courts and controversies, disclosures and rebuttals, we get closer to the end of this frightening story. Keep an eye out for more updates as the legal process moves on, hopefully bringing some kind of justice to people who have been severely harmed. Little note from our sponsor, Beyond the Grassy Knoll. How JFK's Death Changed American Society Forever by A.M. Wolfe. This gripping novel delves into the complicated labyrinth of conspiracy theories behind one of America's most stunning events in history. Whether you're an avid historian or simply inquisitive, this book provides a new viewpoint on how the assassination of JFK changed the path of American culture. It is accessible through Amazon and Audible. So get your copy now and explore the mysteries that continue to define our country. As we wind up, I encourage you to continue to be interested and to ask questions. Through our curiosity, we peel back the layers of the unknown, illuminating the truths that lie behind the darkness. Stay careful, keep your wits about you, and never cease exploring the mysterious corners of the earth. Until next time, I'm Roger Heilig, And this concludes Restless Killers and Mysteries. See you on our next frightening trip.